I think the future of design is like empowered by agents. And you could imagine a principal at a design studio at the early stage, drawing in a box and saying, okay, I want an agent to go figure out space layout for me. I want another agent to go figure out, hey, like what's the rough structural layout I should have for this space? I want another agent to go do research on costing for this location on this date and do some costing estimates for me. And I want another agent to go do like 4D planning, scheduling on this model for me. And the future of authoring platforms need to be built with that ecosystem and that workflow in mind, because the reality is like that is how the future of our industry is going to be.
We've got a really exciting episode for you today with Paul O'Carroll, founder of Arcol, a browser-based BIM platform designed to transform how you design buildings collaboratively. In our conversation, Paul shares his experience evolving from a game developer to starting a company focused on dethroning Autodesk's Revit. In our episode, he touches on the origin of Arcol was personal. Multiplayer BIM is hard and necessary, and how feasibility studies are the foothold to building a collaborative AEC ecosystem. Whether you're a designer, builder, owner, or you're a founder in PropTech and Contech, you'll get real value from Paul's insights on scaling product, navigating venture expectations, and rethinking how we author and collaborate in the built world. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of Buildings 2.0. Today I'm speaking with Paul O'Carroll, founder and CEO of Arcol, a browser-based BIM platform designed to transform how you design buildings collaboratively. Paul, thanks for joining me.
I'm excited. I know we've known each other for a while, but I'm excited to the pod.
Well, take me back. So growing up, you wrote about sitting under your dad's drafting table, watching him painstakingly design a building from scratch. Take me back to that moment. What was your relationship with architecture and design?
Yeah. I mean, again, I wrote up this a little bit in our manifesto, but my dad's an architect. Specifically, my dad has never really worked at large practices. When I was growing up, I think he was working at a practice that two other people led it. And so it was a lot of like late nights. I saw very little of him. It was also back in like the kind of the GFC in Ireland and Europe, kind of, 2008, 2009, when the construction industry wasn't doing very good. And so any projects that came in, it was a stressful time. And some of my earliest memories are he had an office at home. And so I would, when he'd come home from work, sit under his drawing table and literally watch him like draft out this building. And as a kid, that was the most magical, beautiful, like he would take me on site, 6 months later, and I'd like see this fucking building that he just designed, that I saw getting designed. I'd see it manifest in reality. And I remember that moment being a pretty defining moment where as a kid, you look around the built world and I feel like every architect kind of empathizes with this moment, but there's a moment where you realize, shit, someone just designed this and that's their idea that now everyone gets to see. And that is a really unique thing about our industry that I think is a reason why a lot of people get excited by architecture. And yeah, that's my early touch point with our industry.
And yet, in spite of that, you didn't actually go traditional route, but you ended up in game development. How?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is like architecture is beautiful because it's both a technical industry and it's also an incredibly creative industry. It's like the mixture, specifically like old school architects, kind of like my father, where it's like you learn to draft and then you learn to be a project manager and a kind of like job captain on site. And you really did the 0 to 1 of construction. You weren't just a designer, you weren't a technical person, you were kind of everything. And that didn't, although the industry excited me, that problem space didn't excite me. I'd never really felt I want to be the person who turns their ideas into physical manifestations in the world. And so as a kid, I grew up in a relatively not prosperous upbringing. And so I taught myself programming at a really young age on, I think, my sister's laptop that we had. And so the story about how I taught myself programming is kind of a crappy one. I was scrolling through YouTube one day as a kid. I was like fucking 9 or 10. And I came across a YouTube thumbnail that was like the Matrix 0101 kind of across the screen. I was like, that's fucking cool. I want to see that video. It was a C# tutorial video that was like intro to Visual Studio and C# programming. And so okay, let me go download this thing called Visual Studio. And that was my journey into programming. And you do the traditional hello world command app. And you're get this thing, you get to kind of, you write a thing and it comes out in the command. You're like, this is awesome. And that transpired into, I came across Unity a couple of months later and realized, oh shit, this quote unquote program. I didn't know what programming meant. I just realized I learned a thing that I can get the computer to do a thing for me. And that was interesting. Came across Unity and realized this language I'd learned was applicable in game development, and kind of the spark clicked where I was like, shit, I can make fucking games. This is incredible. So learned Unity, made some early kind of crappy projects. I think I told this story previously, but I'll give the TLDR version of it. I then came across Upwork. I don't actually know if Upwork is still around, but it's like a freelancing platform. You can do stuff on it. And part of why I came across it is because I was looking for an artist. I was like, I want to work with an artist to build some games that I was working on. And so I looked up like hire artists. Again, I had no idea how to fucking hire people, but found Upwork, realized, oh, there's like job postings. I should do some of these. And so got my first few quote unquote gigs, if I want to call it that, on Upwork, and realized, oh shit, I can like be paid to do this. This is a like transformational thing. That pivoted years later into a digital design studio where effectively projects I took on just became bigger and bigger, and actually eventually became adjacent to game development. Unity as a company was going through this. I think they're still trying to do it, but they were trying to pivot away from just games and take their engine into media and entertainment and automotive and AEC. And they had a product called Unity Reflect. I think it was like their construction BIM viewer thing. It was terrible. It was crap. But they were like investing into AEC. And so the industry as a whole started realizing, oh shit, I can use Unity to do other things. And I started getting projects that was less game developed and more just traditional tools. And so kind of built a company out of that I call Blindfold Studios, where we built effectively we're building design tools for Fortune 500 companies. I think the best example I actually gave this morning on an interview to somebody is we had a project where we were working for a really large tech company. They have a pretty big retail presence. You would know the name of them, probably own one or two of their phones. It doesn't begin with an A. It's the Android world, not the Apple world. And they had a big retail presence, and they were taking those design services in-house. So they would effectively work with an architect of record in whatever city they're working in, and their team of designers in their HQ would design all the retail stores, because they were just refreshing the FF&E every year. And so they wanted a tool that had a set of components that they could load their furniture into and then effectively visualize it and kick out not necessarily shop drawings, but kind of like rough schematic drawings to give to the architect of record to go make the drawing set in that region they're working with. They also wanted to be collaborative because they needed a ability to collaborate with the contractor. And so years earlier, I had formed this thesis about Google Docs for architecture. I had thought one of the big problems in our industry when I started working with my dad a little more, when I was building Blindfold in the early days, was like, this is the most collaborative industry in the entire world, yet you're using single player tools. And you have tools like Google Docs and Figma, where those industries have realized, hey, this is effectively a multiplayer workflow. We should have multiplayer tools. And so we start building a lot of tools that were effectively that at Blindfold. And I realized, why am I building tools on top of the current authoring platforms? Why am I building a tool that collaborates with Revit to allow you to go do some niche like FF&E placement? Why don't I just go and try and replace the actual authoring suite with some of these concepts, with collaboration, with the browser in mind? And the early idea of Arcol was, what would our industry look like if your authoring platform could be in the browser and be collaborative? And so that was kind of how Blindfold, how I got into game dev, how I led Blindfold, and how Blindfold led to Arcol.
And then
That's a very TLDR version of the story, by the way. We can pick on any part of that.
I appreciate you just fast forwarded through years of learning there, but somehow you came to the conclusion that let me start a company that directly competes with 800-pound gorilla that's existed for the last 40 years and has had a kind of monopoly on at least modeling technology in the built environment. All of the seeds that you learned back in your programming days at Blindfold, how did you come to that conclusion? What was kind of the inflection point or series of inflection points where it's like, all right, I'm doing this?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I kind of touched on it briefly in that version of the story, but I had this, it came from frustration. Like it was clear to me that our industry needed to rethink their authoring tools years before. So let me kind of take a step back to Blindfold was just starting to take off. Things were becoming reasonably serious. I was in effectively the Irish equivalent of the last 2/3 years of high school in Ireland. And I hadn't had a business where I was hiring people and we're building technology for large companies, and I needed to work somewhere. I was trying to convince both my mother and father to let me leave school. My mother wouldn't let me. My father, I actually vividly remember this.
This was in high school?
Go on. This was the Irish equivalent of high school. Yeah. So I was, wow. I was 15, maybe 16 at the time. Wow. That's probably about right.
Yeah.
And again, I had a real business. We were like, had a bunch of freelancers. We made real money as a company. And so I had to convince my parents to let me leave school. My mom was like, fuck no, you're never like finish school. You're going to, go do it. My dad's point of view was, well, you can leave school if you come work in my office, because at least then I can kind of not watch over you, but like, I know what you're doing. Everything's fine. You don't need to go rent your own office. So I rented an office in the architect's office that my dad was working in at the time. I rented a desk. And it was through that experience where I was like, hey, this industry that as a kid I thought was magical and beautiful, I'm now in practice, quote unquote, although adjacent to it, I'm physically in the practice. And just like as a bystander watching, sharing files over USB, or there was a situation where they had a project they're working on in Cork, which is kind of south of Dublin, kind of like South Ireland, and the ACC at the time, I don't know what it was called. It wasn't BIM 360, whatever kind of collaborative platform they're using, or kind of like file sharing platform, wasn't working.
Yeah.
So someone in the office was like, I'll bring it down to them. So they loaded it onto a USB hard drive and brought all the sheets down to them, to the contractor, to hand it to them. And at the time I was like, this is fucking nuts. You guys, this is a big multi kind of €1 million project, and you're collaborating by driving a hard drive 3 hours in a. And at the time, this is where this early idea of like, hey, what if your authoring platform actually enabled the way you work? Clearly, this industry is becoming more collaborative. We had people actually starting to work from home. We had a guy, I won't get into details, but there was a guy who lived outside of Dublin and would drive into the office every day because this was a firm that lots of people wanted to work at in Dublin. And one day a week, he's like, I'm not driving in, I'm just going to work from home. And he had no way to collaborate with the team when he was at home. This was a long time, 5, 6, 7 years ago. And so the idea at the time was like, what if your authoring environment was similar to what Google Docs did for writing? What if you actually were natively in the browser? What if you could just simply share a link with somebody and kind of collaborate together in the authoring platform itself? Not collaborating on a derivative, but like collaborating on the platform. And then fast forward, then I like was building up Blindfold and was building this company. And at the time, to come back to your question as to why I ended up doing it, at the time my thought was, that's a cool concept. I'm sure this company called Autodesk will do it eventually. It makes lots of sense. It's clearly what they'll do. I almost forgot about it. Fast forward years later, when I was building tools at Blindfold and start working for kind of companies adjacent to the industry, but solving some of the industry's problems. I mentioned that tech retailer. I realized, oh shit, Autodesk never did this. And like 5 years later, this is still the same. And I remember sitting there with my dad one day and thinking, I actually vividly remember the conversation in his house. And I said, I think I want to go do this. Like I want to close projects at Blindfold. I want to go start this company because I think this is really important. I think it's like the most important thing I'll do. And at the time, I remember him saying, Paul, you do realize this is going to be an expensive problem. You're going to need at least $10 million. And I said, Dad, I'm going to need at least $100 million. And we both were like, blown. This is insane. $100 million. Now we're building Arcol. I know we're going to need fast amounts. This is a really difficult problem. And so I started Arcol. I can get into like how we started the company and timing of it and how we raised our first round of financing, but that's a little bit of like when I first was like, this needs to happen, built Blindfold, realized Autodesk never did it, and thought it was more out of frustration. If Autodesk isn't going to do it, fuck it. Why don't I just be the one to go do it?
Talk to me about the timeline. So, one of the things that I think about often is that there's a bit of a survivor bias in that Autodesk has existed for 40 years. You started Arco about 2021, about what are we, 4 years in? How do you think about timelines? I think back to Elon Musk's master plan of Tesla, where you do this and then you do that and then you do this and then kind of unlock this. How do you think about that? Because I think it's just unfair, especially you considering raise venture capital, just knowing that this was going to be a very expensive problem to solve. And you just kind of knew that going into it. But I think one of the things venture capital has a way of doing is just putting pressure on you to move very, very quickly. And sometimes I think you rightly kind of recognize that much of the venture capital industry just kind of forgets that a lot of these companies have had the privilege of just kind of unlocking various chapters across the decades. You somehow have to do this like by next year or next, and then how do you think about timeline? What needs to be true today to unlock the next chapter, to unlock your next chapter?
Yeah, I think maybe just I'll touch on kind of like how I think about the timeline of Arcol, and then kind of quantum of capital of fundraising and why that's important and the pressures VCs put on you. So I think about by the way, I apologize. I look this way or this way when I think. I'm not being rude. I had actually someone recently say to me on an interview, like, are you reading something? And I was like, no, I just was like, I need to look somewhere else when I'm thinking. It's how my brain works. They thought I had all the answers prepared. It's like, no, I wish I did. So the way I think about Arcol is we're trying to build a generational company. We're attacking what I think of as the biggest problem in construction, which is everything is inherently built upon design and the design tool layer we're forced to use fucking sucks. And if you can rethink that design tool layer, construction can look violently different. And so I think about the timeline of Arcol, not in quarters or months or years, it's like decades. This company has to be around for a very long time for us to be successful. Now, that is almost in conflict with the concept of raising venture capital, where VCs have a 10-year fund cycle or 5-year fund cycle, and they have to return capital, and like they're much more short-term minded. And I think this is maybe one of the slight misconceptions about how we should think about VC in our industry, where that problem is magnified with the quantum of capital that you fundraise. So when you're raising a pre-seed or a seed round, look, we raised our pre-seed and seed round from the most incredible firm called Cowboy Ventures. Ted, our partner on the board, is one of my favorite people I've ever met. We raised our pre-seed round the summer of 2021. Now, this was a very different era of venture capital, but we are now only releasing our product, and we're releasing a very early slice of what the long-term of Arcol should be. If we would have raised $100 million the summer of 2021, Arcol would look like a very different company because you have such a larger quantum of capital with your VCs expecting much more. At the pre-seed and seed stage, the whole purpose of you raising that financing is go figure out some technical risk or go-to-market risk so you can unlock the moment where you can raise more capital. I think it is a mixture of the quantum of capital you've raised and the partners that you choose. When we raised that pre-seed and that seed, I was really, really clear with our investors that not only are we raising money to build the most technically complex problem I could think of at the time, putting fucking collaborative 3D modeling in the browser, we're doing it in an industry that has traditionally long sales cycles. So this is going to take a long time, both the product and the go-to-market motion to kick in. One of the examples I used at the time, we like coined the term really early on, Figma for BIM. Now lots of people are using it to describe their company, which is great. I think that's awesome. The reason why I use that is because Figma went through a very similar journey. They took 4 years to go build a product before they release it. Now, if you look at the journey of Figma, when they start raising serious quantum of capital, when they're raising 30 and 40 and 50 and $100 million, the business was working. There was clearly a motion. There's like a go-to-market machine where you can dump in $1 and you get $1.50 on the outside. And that is when you raise shitloads of money. And it is about, can you return this capital in 5 years? Can you return it in 10 years? Will you be a public company? What is the scale to get to $100 million? Can you triple, double, all that kind of bullshit? Your revenue growth matters because at some point you're going to be a public company and your growth and your margins actually matter. Like there is a public market company who's treating you like that. At the early days when you're raising $5-10 million, it is about figuring out some technical risk or product risk. And so I like push back against the question, I guess, is what I'm saying a little bit of, VCs have this expectation that you return capital in 10 years. That is true with the quantum of capital that you're raising. If you raise $1 billion, then yeah, there's an expectation. There was a timeline expectation there because you either have to be a public company or you got to go raise $2 billion. And to raise $2 billion, you got to prove an exponential growth rate. At pre-seed and seed, you don't need to prove an exponential growth rate. You need to prove, here's my thesis about this market. Here's what I think it plays out. Here's 2 to 3 things I want to use this cash to go do. And if I do that, I'll go raise more cash. And so I push back against the question, I guess, a little bit because it's a framing problem. It's a capital quantity problem.
Yeah. And to your point, I think before going growth, you just want to kind of de-risk that technical level. On that technical level, in the last 4 years, from the time you wrote the manifesto to today, what's been technically something that has been the most difficult thing that you didn't anticipate going into it? I mean, you kind of alluded to it earlier, right? The kind of multiplayer paradigm in and of itself is technically a fundamentally different thing.
Yeah.
What's keeping you up?
So let me touch on the multiplayer stuff for a second. I think the trickiest thing we've had to figure out was not a technical problem. It was a product problem. Let me touch on the multiplayer thing first. So I think when I started Arcol, and now every company talks about being collaborative and being real time and being multiplayer, and that's awesome. Those really are truly table stakes. I think what not a lot of people realize, and it makes me incredibly happy that they don't, is that this is actually a really difficult thing to do. It's a difficult thing to do correctly. There are lots of tools now that say, plug in with our API and we'll give you real-time collaboration. You'll see your cursors. But if you're going to truly build a powerful 3D or a powerful collaborative authoring tool, you need to think about real-time in every aspect of product and technical choices that you make. The learning point for me was when we hired a bunch of the early Figma engineers. So we're super lucky in the team that we've built. We've been fortunate to hire a lot of early Figma engineers. And the reason why Figma engineers are important is because Figma figured this out. Figma was the first company to do kind of collaborative co-authoring in a complex design environment. And There's a big difference in Arcol pre-hiring those individuals and post-hiring those individuals. And I don't really think a lot of companies like understand the trickiness here. It's like not an easy problem. It's easy on the surface to build a collaborative toy, really fucking hard to build a solid collaborative professional app. And my advice to people who are judging tools is like, go try and break it. Open 2 different tabs, delete shit, undo shit, try and break it. And what you will find is most of the companies who say they're real time, you'll be able to break it pretty quickly and easily. And so that was not something I expected going into it. I actually thought that, hey, collaboration's been solved. This table stakes. This will be super easy. It's easy with the right team. It's something you got to be like pretty aware of consistently.
Yeah. But at the technical level, or just to double click on that before you move
Yeah.
on, at the technical level, you mentioned, I mean, you alluded to the Autodesks and other kind of legacy players, and you along with me and the entire industry, assuming, oh, they'll probably figure it out, but they haven't. Suggesting that there's kind of like an infrastructural reason why they haven't. Is it a technical reason, like they literally just can't at this point because they're so far in, or is there some other, thing beyond that?
Yeah, so Autodesk specifically, like Revit will never be re-engineered or re-architected for the browser. That's just Revit as it currently stands, a product won't happen. You will see them trying to glom on ACC and better data linkage, so it doesn't feel like you're on the desktop, but you're still on the desktop. Now, what you're seeing is platforms like Forma, where this is really their story to try and reinvent authoring in the browser collaboratively. And there is no technical reason as to why Autodesk couldn't build a good collaborative authoring tool, but I would recommend you try Forma. It fucking sucks. It's not a good tool. And this is a good example of like, we're collaborative and you kind of get in and try and play with collaboration. It just breaks. And it's like, oh, you guys aren't really collaborative. You're saying it because it's a checkbox. But we don't believe collaboration is a checkbox. We believe collaboration is an incredibly important part of the future of our industry. There's no technical reason why Autodesk couldn't do it. You'll see it evolve in platforms like Forma. There is a technical reason why Revit specifically will never go to the browser. And there are startup competitors, I won't name names, of ours who have built desktop apps. You're now seeing them try and take their desktop app and shove it in the browser. It's never a good experience. When you're architecting your application, you're architected with both real time in mind, meaning if you want to share a link with somebody, you now have accessibility. And so the problem becomes this is kind of where Figma, where real time came from for Figma, where they wanted to share a link with somebody. And the problem is, if I share a link and I make a change, what happens? Do you have to like refresh your browser for it to load? Do you have to? Does it load? Are you always out of sync? And so the way to solve that problem is you always have it in sync. You're always collaborative. You see my changes, I see yours, and that's where the whole like real time collaborative kind of piece came from for Figma. I forget what my point was in all of that. Anyway,
Yeah.
Revit won't do it, but you'll see it evolve with platforms like Forma.
Yeah. In addition to the collaboration, was there other kind of technical challenges you running into? I mean, that's kind of the heart of it, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, the other like technical challenge, quote unquote, is we have to effectively build our own like geometry kernel in the browser. I don't necessarily view that as like a technical challenge. I mean, it's been done. It wasn't. We didn't actually go and take. What you can model in Arcol is not what you can model in tools like Rhino or kind of kernels like Parasolid. Like it is a very small slice of it, but over time that becomes an increasingly technical problem. How do you put more and more complex modeling into the browser over time? I think the really early challenge we had to figure out in Arcol is like not a technical one, mainly because like we hired a fucking awesome team. And so stuff like how do you get performant browser-based applications, like it wasn't super technical or hard for us. It was just a time resource problem. There are teams out there that they find that a very technically challenging problem. But one of the decisions I made really early on is like, you have to hire a world-class team because we're solving a really difficult problem. And so I don't really think I cannot think of a single, like, this was a thing we banged our head against the wall for 6 months to figure out. That wasn't really what our call was. What it has been is like, what is the product? And that has been really hard to figure out. And it's really easy to talk about Arcol as a modern collaborative building design tool. You can describe it as Figma for BIM. You can say we want to kill Revit. But the go-to-market and the business risk is like, where do you start in that? Do you just take 10 years, raise $500 million and like try and build a full suite in the browser and then release it? Do you unveil a certain slice of it? What slice? How do you differentiate that? How do you think about it? Is it concept? Is it like all of these kind of problems? I'm reflecting back on this now because we're launching in this is 28th, so we're launching next Monday, 5 days. That is terrifying to say. We're launching the product in its current slice in 5 days. And I'll touch on like what the product is and how we think about it. But I went back to, we did a preview release of Arcol August of 2023. So it was 18 months ago. And the purpose there was we had been building the product for about 18 months at that point. And we thought our early slice was concept. We're going to build a perfect concept tool. It's like SketchUp. It has some BIM stuff. You can collaborate. It has this environment called boards where it's effectively Miro, but with views and sheets. It's like Miro plus InDesign. It's mood boarding and it's presentation. And that product hasn't changed. That board piece is the exact same. That we were like one of the first to do it. I think you're seeing a lot of people start to do it now. And it's a really exciting, different way to think about kind of project delivery. But I'm reflecting on this because I went back and watched some old videos of the product back then. And like, we had no idea what the product was. It was like fucking, there was walls in there. There was like SketchUp like massing. It wasn't actually valuable. Like, it was just a toy. Nobody really cared about it. And I fast forward to today and we have like very clearly identified the pain point we're solving. Our goal is your model plus your data plus presentations at the feasibility stage. And that delta between those two has been surprisingly tricky to figure it. It's I think Chris Dixon was the guy who coined this term, but it's like the idea maze that startups go through. Uh, you know, pre-seed and seed startups is all about just getting through the idea maze. You go down this way, you go, that's a bad idea. Let's go back. Let's retrace here. Let's go right instead of left. And at the end, you realize, this is the path we're meant to take. And you can look back on it and say, oh, it was super clear. Like, we knew it from day one. But really, it was like taking all these million turns and making bad decisions. And that has been one of the trickier things in our cult's history. It's tricky looking back. In the moment, I thought it was all super clear. It was like, we're concept. It's going to be awesome. Now looking back, that's been the trickiest thing. And I think that will continue to be true in our cult for the future because we're building a product that has a really wide surface area. We're trying to displace full authoring and documentation suite. And where you decide to slice off your value and how you think about displacing that part of the process, it's really clear looking back. It's not super clear looking forward. And that I think will continue to be a thing we got to figure out.
Yeah. You and I both, I'm sure, have seen incredible products that got no traction and really mediocre products that have gone global. I'm also kind of trying to reconcile. On the one hand, you're building a collaborative tool that presumes that multi parties around the table need to be using it. On the other hand, you as a founder, CEO, as a company, you got to decide, all right, you got to pick a lane, presuming that you got to start somewhere. And so there's this kind of conflict between kind of being a multi-sided party, but then also have to sell the thing. How do you think about it? Where do you start?
Oh man, it's a great question. Yeah.
And you know, as I say this out loud, I mean, you've mentioned feasibility is kind of a key stepping stone to this kind of this equation. In this case, can I assume architects are kind of the first buyers in this kind of like multi-party puzzle?
Yeah, I think so. Let me take a step back to get to your question. So the way we think about how this market evolves in the long term is like, yes, Revit is maybe $1.5 billion a year as a product line, like really big opportunity. But really, this market is far fucking bigger than people realize because Revit doesn't monetize collaboration. Can't you collaborate over email and PDF? And you're seeing suites like ACC and all these kind of collaborative kind of CDEs try and monetize some of that. But what tools that have done this successfully, like Figma noticed, is you build a design tool for the designers. But once you make it collaborative and accessible, your market isn't just the designers. It's like everybody on that product. It's biz dev, finance, sales, marketing, the client, and at scale, you're able to monetize all of them. And so we view this playing out in a very similar way in architecture, in our industry, where we're building for the authors, we're building for the designers, but at scale, it's everybody. It's the bank, it's the owner, it's the local community. Like, everybody needs to collaborate on this thing, and at scale, we're able to monetize all of them because we provide value to all of them. Now, your question becomes, okay, that's great, but like, where do you start and how do you focus and how do you think about that playing out? And so the way we think about this is acting against the design process. Our roadmap is, can we be the perfect feasibility tool? And then it's like, okay, can we be the perfect SD tool? Can we be the perfect DD tool and CD tool? And so the collaborative stakeholders that we care about and we're focused on are the people at that stage. So for us, mostly today, that is the architect, it's the owner, and more we're seeing it be the GC. Either the GC is being brought in early for pre-con services to costing, so they're a valuable collaborator, or an interesting trend that I know you're seeing too is GCs are just taking design services in-house. And GCs are actually the ones providing more and more of these early feasibility and concept designs. And so the product we're releasing on June 2nd is squarely focused at I don't necessarily think about it as like the architect, the owner, the GC. I think about it as the author. Like, who is the one designing the space? That is who we're building for and who we're monetizing today. And then the question becomes, how can you monetize the collaborators? And my honest answer to that question is like, we don't know who we're going to monetize first. It could be the owner, and there's a specific SKU of Arcol that is for owners managing their portfolio and comparing all the projects against each other. It could be specific GC costing stuff. We'll build out a almost pre-con estimating style workflow for those. I think in our user base today, in the author suite, we see designers at architecture firms mostly. There's a lot of designers at GCs that use Arcol. There's actually a lot of designers at large engineering firms that use Arcol today. And so it's less about like, are you monetizing the architect, the engineer, or the owner, and more, are you monetizing the author or are you monetizing the collaborator? And once we get into the collaborator, I think you'll start to see SKUs almost. This is one way it will play out, and I'm excited to look back on this podcast in 3 years and realize that was a stupid answer because it may not be SKUs. It may be they all use the same version. We don't know. And so what we want to prove in our launch today is we can monetize the authors and the designers. And hey, look at this incredible usage we have amongst the collaborators. And then we as a team have to go figure out, who do we slice off first? What's the value? How do we expand that over time? So we won't necessarily be monetizing them in the beginning, but that's a valuable question. Like, how do we slice that off? And who do we pick first? The answer is, I don't know yet, because we need to see it in the data.
Talk to me about your instincts on authoring itself. So if we go way back, right, we go back to CAD, you draw a line, another one, and I guess you move into Revit and you're more object-based. Companies like Hypar, for example, are taking more kind of like a component approach where like you don't start with a blank slate, you start with different components. I don't know if they've since kind of evolved. In your case, how do you think about authoring? I can't help but to think that, generative AI capabilities, there's a world where one thing is kind of selling the tool, and then another thing is kind of like a do it for you service. How do you think about it? Where do you stand? Like, is there ever a world where, you put a few inputs and then something's kind of generated? Now, obviously I'm way oversimplifying the process, but where do you stand in that spectrum?
I think, all right, here's my first spicy take. So I think most generative design solutions, there's like not a lot new there. Those have been around in Dynamo scripts in firms for a decade or two. Like, not a lot of interesting shit. Where I think like the automation of space layout or of stadium bowl generation or of like name your typology problem that you want to automate, that will like continue to be a problem. You'll write scripts, like we've got lots of thoughts about how you can do that in a much more natural kind of, not necessarily natural language way, but a better UX framework than stringing together nodes on a graph like Dynamo. I don't necessarily think it's a very interesting problem. I think the more interesting problem is, how does authoring play out when you are not necessarily the one doing most of the authoring? And what I mean by that is, I think the future of design is like empowered by agents. And you could imagine a principal at a design studio at the early stage drawing in a box and saying, okay, I want an agent to go figure out space layout for me. I want another agent to go figure out, hey, like, what's the rough structural layout I should have for this space? I want another agent to go do research on costing for this location on this date and do some costing estimates for me. And I want another agent to go do like 4D planning, scheduling on this model for me. And the future of authoring platforms need to be built with that ecosystem and that workflow in mind, because the reality is like, that is how the future of our industry is going to be. People will be able to do more with less, because you'll both be collaborating better with external stakeholders, and those external stakeholders will almost devolve into like agentic frameworks where, why doesn't your GC sell you their agent? Why are they selling you services? Could they sell you a Turner Construction Company agent that joins your file and does some estimating for you based off that? Can Turner scale as a company far more because of that? And so I hate to like tie it back to collaboration, but like, that is the problem to be solved. The problem is, how can you better collaborate in this ecosystem? Because the reality is there's going to be more collaborators, not less. And the cool thing is those collaborators aren't even going to be individuals. They're going to be agents, because agents are effectively just collaborators. They should join your file. You should have control over them. They should give you the option to accept it or deny it. And like, all of this UX framework will play out over the next decade or so. But that to me feels like the next important shift in platforms. It's not necessarily the web. It's not necessarily collaboration, although it is. That framework needs to be laid before you can layer in scale. through agents. And so, yes, generative design and automating space layout, those are all interesting, exciting problems. But the more interesting, exciting problem in the future of authoring is how can you collaborate with not people, but agents? And that, but I know that runs the risk of like seeming really buzzwordy and stupid and like, oh, agents clearly going to be important. I think it's not a buzzword. I think it's really fucking important.
It's one of those things where it's likely, gradually, and then all of a sudden, suddenly, right? Where I think you're right on that one. And yet we have to kind of continue to start somewhere. So I guess what I want to maybe shift is your own experience as you're navigating a really difficult problem, right? Coming from a programming background, you're also building a company, and you're needing to finance that through venture capital. To your point, hiring a world-class team, forcing you to evolve from just trying to build it to yourself to now imagining a team that can kind of build it. In your own experience, what's that been like? I mean, it's one thing if you can do it, but I imagine your world now where it's like, how well can you communicate this? So an incredible team, likely better than you, can do it. And if you're successful, I assume you're going to need to continue to kind of scale yourself. How have you changed since the manifesto? This is, if you can't tell, I have a vested interest in this question because it's one
No, I
thing like
love it. This is
do the work yourself, and others like, shoot, now I got to communicate this actually to others. They got to do it better than I.
so I think one of the most important things that a CEO can figure out, and will never truly figure out, but needs to get better at, is figuring out how to scale yourself. And there are different points in a company's scale where when you go from C to A, which kind of signifies product, to like figuring out the market, and then A to B, which kind of signifies, okay, you figured out the product, the market, now can you figure out the sales machine? And then B to C, again, this is like generic terms and it's not really as black and white, but B to C is like, okay, like can you like all of this now works? Can you just scale this to $500 million? Like, can you build a second product? Can you go into this market? Can you expand it? Can you build out the team to scale it? And so it's like build it, sell it, scale it, almost. As you know, Arcol has not gone through that full journey yet, and so this is an evolution in this is a dot. Sorry, this is a line, not a dot. Like I can give you my thoughts on it now, but that'll change. The reason I say that is because we recently raised a large round of financing, and I've had to figure out how to scale things in the company that I haven't had to scale before. And I don't think I'm as good at it as I should be. I think the biggest thing that's changed from the time of the manifesto, to answer your question, from the time of the manifesto to now, is I've had to figure out how to scale important product and business decisions to not only me. That's been fucking hard. At the time of the manifesto, like me and Mike on the team made pretty much all the product decisions. I knew everything that was going on. On the business front, it was all me. Like, I had full context on everything. I knew everything. Now when you look at Arcol, like I'm not the one doing all of the product demos. I'm not the one selling all of Arcol. I actually am involved in now very little of the ICP conversations. I'm involved in much more of the how can we partner with this large firm and how can we get this really large contract through the door. And I think the one thing I've learned on that is finding the right people that you align with the most. The best example here is Aaron, who now leads growth on our team, which represents kind of handing off a lot of the business decisions, kind of sales conversations. It took me a really long time to hire that role. A really long time. I talked to a lot of people. I talked to a lot of account executives. I talked to a lot of growth people. I talked to a lot of sales people. I talked to lots and lots and lots of people. I talked to like people who used to work at competitors of ours to figure out like how do they think about it and how should I think about it. And alignment in trust in that first person that you say, like, I'm going to give you this responsibility is really important. And what I've learned through that process is like, you have to give the responsibility, you stay aligned, and then you're like constantly saying and giving feedback throughout the process. And so like a very practical example here is, and this maybe gets too into the nitty gritty of company building, but we start recording all of our sales demos. Never done it before. We start recording all of them. We do it through a service called Gong. So Aaron on our team does all of our sales conversations. And for the first 20 or 30 that I wasn't in, I watched all of them. I watched every second of them. I took notes. Me and Aaron afterwards would debrief. We'd chat about it. I'd say, hey, like this thing, you probably could have said this here. Like this would be the way I would figure out this out. And this way I would answer this question. And I gave Aaron a lot of authority to answer certain questions in a certain way. Like almost imagine you're the CEO and someone asks a roadmap question. You don't need to say, hey, I'll go talk to my CEO and give you the answer. I trust you to make those decisions. Let's kind of like align on how we think about it and you can answer them. That was a process. And like, we're still going through it, and I still need to get better at it and figure out. Uh, I think you asked for like a tip. I think that was the start of this question. I completely forgot what the question was.
I love where you're going with this. So this is something that's, I'm sure now sounds like it hasn't just plagued me, but you and I'm sure others. But on a spectrum, here's what I've found, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts. On the spectrum is I've found long time B2B SaaS executives that have sold, going from $1 to a bajillion dollars in ARR, and they kind of optimize for that kind of B2B SaaS motion. On the other hand, but with perhaps very little industry experience. On the other hand, you've got purebred architects, BIM all their life. That's all they know. Perhaps very little sales experience, but you could put them in a room and they could, meddle for hours and sit down with the client. On that spectrum, what is the right combination of proper sales motions and understanding basic sales motions and just knowing the ins and outs of this product? How do you think about that? And I assume
Is
you
this
found
for a
it
sales hire?
yeah, for growth and sales.
Yeah. So my current perspective on this, and I reserve the right to change my mind in the future because I probably will. If you're hiring specifically for a sales role, a really good sales individual, they're good at their job because they can empathize, they can learn the language, and they can resonate with the user. And so, if that's true and they have those qualities, like, they are better qualities to hire for than I was an architect for 25 years. I can empathize, but like, I don't really know what BANT is. I don't really know how to qualify sales leads. That's the shit that like you're good at and you should go like that. You should not figure out on the job. Whereas a really good sales leader or sales individual, they're constantly changing industry. And so it's their job to be able to resonate, understand the language and talk the language and throw themselves into the pain points of this industry so they can feel it and talk to it. And if they're not doing that, they're not a good sales individual. Now, I think it's your job as a leader of the company to give that person the leeway to go do that. And one of the people I asked advice for this on really early on was Dylan. Dylan Field is the CEO of Figma. He's one of our really early investors. And I asked him this question because this was like a very similar problem that you're talking about that I went through, which is like, how do you hire for a sales leader? Should it be from industry? Should it be sales? And he told me that when he first hired his first sales leader, who was the old VP of sales at Figma, I think like for the first couple of months, he just had him in the support queue. Like, you're not doing sales. You just like get into intercom and answer support questions. You got to like learn the pain points, talk to users. And that is like the antithesis of what you do with a sales leader. What you do with a sales leader is you hype them up, you get them in, you say, here's a target, let's hit it, let's go knock the sales out of this quarter. Setting that framework and as a leader, giving that person the leeway to learn the industry if they don't already know it is really important. So that if I'm to pick a spectrum, I'm gonna far outweigh on the sales side specifically for a salesperson, because that is they need to be good at that and they can learn the industry. That's not true for every role.
Right.
Like
You've talked. Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, go ahead. Fine.
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of double click on this. So you talked about the methods by which you lead. Um, in your personal brand as a leader, how do you scale yourself? Do you write? Do you use video to kind of provide a framework for a growing team? Do you have company all hands? I mean, what are the kind of tactics and methods that you use as a leader to kind of scale yourself?
Yeah. So this will need to change over time. And it's actually something that I'm starting to consider as we're scaling the company more. For context of those who aren't familiar with Arcol, we're a really small company. There's 13 of us, maybe 14. There's some number under 15 of us on the team. So like, we're not a big organization. My current way of doing this, which I think is most just in how I communicate, is it's all like through osmosis. I spend a lot of time with people. Aaron, for example, when he joined, I told him like, hey, I'll just text you and be like, hey, let's chat. And I send you /Zoom on Slack and we get in a Zoom call and we chat. And my communication style is far better through a much more like natural osmosis, like chatting through shit. To your point, as the company scales, I can't be talking to every single person in the company and spending a lot of time with them. And so this will probably scale through me documenting most of these things, either in like, I don't really enjoy the written framework. It'll probably be like, I'll sit down for 20 minutes and record a bunch of videos and kind of give my thoughts on like why I think collaboration is important and kind of like give the talk track. At the moment in these early hires where I'm handing off key responsibilities. And as the growth slash sales, kind of like the growth organization scales, the reason why I do a lot of it through osmosis is because it's not just my job to scale that organization. It's me and Aaron's job to scale that organization. And so what's really important in the beginning is that me and him are like fully aligned on how we think about it. We can finish each other's sentences. Like I know exactly what he's thinking in a conversation. He can make a face and I know exactly what he's thinking. That is really important for me because like that is how this scales. Whether the actual medium of the day is written or video or Notion or we fucking put together a big binder that we ship out to people, that doesn't really matter. What matters is like the people that are scaling it with you because we need to talk the same language. And my way of getting that in leaders in Arcol today is I spend a shitload of time with them. A good example here is when I was hiring for this role, one of the things I wanted is I wanted this person in person with me. Now, if you have gone this already or you're watching this and you do this, you'll see Aaron is in Vancouver. He's not in New York. And one of the things I said when he joined the team was, I'm going to spend a lot of time with you in Vancouver and you're going to spend a lot of time with me in New York. I've gone to Vancouver since he's joined 6 times. And I go there for like a week each time. I spend a lot of time with him in person as well. And that when you are remote, that traveling in person, spending a lot, going out for dinner, spending a lot of time together, it's really, really important as the company scales.
Yeah, I think it's really refreshing to hear the kind of human, all too human element of scaling globally, right? The irony, of course, is that to get kind of these big outcomes, these big scaling moments, that it's actually the little things. It's like the texting your colleague and kind of making sure you're kind of alignment, and that is osmosis. Paul, it is not lost on me that you're days away from launching after 4+ years. And you probably got back to back here. Probably 5 minutes from now, you got to jump on some other call. Deeply appreciative, and I agree. I think we're going to look back at this podcast and probably laugh at you're going on to your next chapter. The team's probably moving on to even harder challenges, but deeply grateful for your time. You've got a big event to announce this thing, and you've got some
Yep.
pretty incredible folks joining in New York. For those listening, just what's Retooling AEC? What can folks expect?
Yep. So let me give the quick spiel on the launch and then retooling. So it's probably become clear through the last kind of 30, 40-ish minutes. We're building a modern collaborative building design tool at Arcol. The goal is to replace Revit in the long term. What we're shipping today, or today on June 2nd, is a really, really slice of that. It is the feasibility stage. Can we build the perfect tool at feasibility? And so that is the product that we're releasing on June 2nd, and we've been building it for a really long time. We also started this in-person event series that we call Retooling AEC. And we started it actually when we did our first preview release. When we released Arcol in August of 2023, we released it for a week. And I mentioned earlier, like we really didn't know what we're doing. It was just get this thing out there and we'll close it off after a week. We just wanted feedback at scale. So we did a preview release. I don't think anyone's ever done it since. I've never heard of it, anyone doing it. In Arcol, you had a shot clock that's like, you have 6 days and 12 hours left in Arcol, which I thought was funny and I thought was cool. So the idea at the time was, one of the ways you get in front of customers in our industry at scale is you go to all the industry conferences. We're going to AIA. It's on next week. You go to AIA, you go to AU, you go to Procore Groundbreak, you go to all these conferences, you go to Build and all these things. And be transparent, when we looked at that, I just had this feeling that all of these conferences are kind of bullshit. They're all just the incumbent selling you something. There's not actually good industry-wide conversation. If you're at AU, it's all about Autodesk next thing. If you're at Procore, I love Procore. TUI is one of our investors. Procore is my favorite company. Not shitting on Procore, but it's all about Procore. There's like nothing about the authoring suites. If you're at Build, it's like kind of GC. It's all very, there's somebody selling you something. It's not necessarily just having interesting conversations. And more importantly, as a startup, when you go to these conferences, the way you stand out and get attention is you fucking have puppies at your booth, or you put interesting colors on your booth banner to attract. Like it's all, there's nothing interesting there. And so the other option you have is like, why don't you just host a conversation? Why is Autodesk hosting it? Why don't we as a company just put on the event? And so we wanted to brand it and call it Retooling AEC. And it's not an Arcol sales conference. We talk about Arcol. Actually, I don't think we're going to talk about Arcol at all. And it'll be the day we launch Arcol. We won't talk about Arcol at all at this event. And the idea is, yes, Arcol wants to retool the authoring layer, but the reality is all of our industry needs to be retooled. Our industry still runs on email and PDF, whether it be design, finance, whether it be, name X million things that the industry can do. Arcol wants to be a host of those conversations. We invite firm leaders from architecture, engineering, construction companies, from owners. We invite some startups, some of which are competitive to Arcol. And we invite about 100. This is now going to be our biggest. We're going to have 200 plus people at this event. Free food, free drink, super high quality. Like, it is a really cool night. There's Guinness. I don't know if you can see it. In that box, I have custom Arcol Guinness glasses. So like we ball out. We make it a cool night. And it is an opportunity for leaders in our industry to really just have frank conversations about the future of what our industry needs. How can AEC be retooled? And Arcol just wants to be the host of those conversations. And so we're hosting our largest one ever on June 2nd in New York. We're also live streaming it. This will be our first year hosting it virtually. We've got Bob Rays, the CEO of Corgan, coming in, Gavin Crump, the Aussie BIM guru. We're flying in from Australia to do an awesome talk. And then separately during the day, so we're launching that morning, we're doing retooling that evening. We're going to have all the VIPs like Gavin and all these influencers in Arcol's office when we launch. Like, they're all going to be here and we press go. And they're going to see champagne bottles, or they're going to see fire and people pulling their hair out. It's all going to be transparent. More importantly, Gavin, the Aussie BIM guru, and Nicholas Catele, who runs BIM Pure YouTube channel, are going to host a live stream in the office with the Arcol team in the background, launching Arcol. And it's not Arcol related. They're going to like have a bunch of cool guests on, both in person and virtually. And then that's going to bleed into the virtual retooling stream that we're doing. We're going to stream all the talks that evening. And so we're kind of transparently showing the full day. But most importantly, we're transparently showing the full day, not from Arcol's perspective. Like, don't join this stream to get a demo of Arcol, though Gavin may do one. We're not selling you anything. It is a conversation with the future of our industry, kind of all day. It's gonna be a really fun day.
Well, this has been really fun, and I'm sure I could speak on behalf of the design industry in that you've got some backers. We're all rooting for optionality, and I think you're bringing that to the table. Collaborativeness. I think, we want to see you win. So appreciate your time.
Appreciate it.